right, so my topic today is execution. And I'm not talking about capital punishment per se, but I want to talk about getting things done. Last month, I presented on strategic planning. If you've been here at all, you know that my company was birthed out of a group just like this in 1985 when we undertook to study the principles of planning, specifically strategic planning. And they used my then little painting company, Hart Painting Company, as a guinea pig. And lo and behold, in January of 1985, out came TL Hart Incorporated as a result of the group effort. Well, so I talked last month about strategic planning, and no sooner had I finished it, I thought, there really needs to be a follow-up to this. Because there's one thing to plan, it's another thing to execute the plan. And I have to admit that over the course of the month since, I've thought, who am I to be talking about execution? Because that is probably one of my greatest weaknesses as a business, and that's executing the plan. I'm really good at planning. I know how to plan. I've led strategic planning sessions. I do strategic planning, but I have to admit at the end of the period, there's a lot of things that aren't done, and it's my fault because I failed to execute. So today I want to talk about getting things done. Here's an example of what I mean by saying it was a major weakness that I had during the course of my career up and until 2010, and I mean from 1985 until 2010, I had accumulated much debt. A lot of it was justified, but some of it was actually recommended that I take on for product and equipment acquisitions. But I was caught with a lot of overhead in the late 1990s, and one of my annual goals, and I emphasize annual because it didn't happen every year, it didn't happen at all, was to get out of debt or reduce my debt. And we had a lot of debt. And every year it was on my plan to reduce or eliminate the debt. And the debt never got eliminated or reduced until God moved dramatically and miraculously in my company in the year 2010, when within a 9-month period, we not only eliminated well over $1 million in debt, but ended the year with $333,000 in profit. So it was a major miracle. The point being is that I was never able to accomplish what I set out to do apart from the hand and the power of God. So there's a whole lot of issues that contribute to a lack of the ability to achieve your goals, and I'm going to be touching on those as we go. But let me reiterate a few things about what I said last month as it relates to planning. First of all, don't make plans that you can't keep or you have no intention of keeping. I've been there, done that. Something sounded good, so I wrote it down in my plan as something that I wanted to do, but I never did it because I really wasn't serious about doing it to begin with. Another point is don't make plans that you don't have the capacity or the resources for. Meaning you might have as a goal to make $1 million, but the context of your situation might mean you're going to make 100,000. Don't make plans that you don't have the capacity for or the resources for. And as Christians, don't make plans or set goals that you don't have the faith for. Business books, secular books won't include what we Christians live by. We are to live by faith. The just shall live by faith. So if you want to please God and have a shot at seeing your plans materialize, then be believing in God. There are such things as big goals. In Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he has what he calls the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. In our world, that would be a faith goal, meaning the only way that that's going to happen is if God intervenes and provides you the resources and the power to make it happen. My goal was probably like that because in and of myself, it was totally unrealistic and unnatural to think that I could reduce the amount of debt based on the amount of business we were doing and the amount of profit that we were making. So execution is all about getting things done. It's one thing to plan, it's another thing to execute your plan. So in anticipation of today, and actually as a personal benefit to myself, I've been listening to the audio book by the same name, Execution. And its subtitle is The Discipline of Getting Things Done. This is by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. And I read a lot of books, so I'm always in the middle of more than one book. So I decided that I would listen to the audio book, and I'm so glad I did. The book was recommended to me by King's Group member John O'Leary probably 7, 8, 9 years ago. I bought it, opened it up, read a little bit, and thought, this is over my head. Because in this book, actually was written in 2002 and updated in 2009, it basically deals with publicly traded companies with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. And you'll understand what I mean when I give you their definition of execution in just a moment. But I've been getting a lot out of it from principles, because there's principles that apply to everything. They apply to publicly traded companies with locations all over the world, and they'll apply to little pipsqueaks like me that has a painting company that employs 15 people. The principles, they work. Good principles, godly principles work no matter who you are or what you do. If you employ them, they work. One of the key words you want to pick up here in the subtitle of this book as it relates to getting things done is the word discipline. It says the discipline of getting things done. And as we go through, you'll realize that discipline is required if you are ever going to accomplish anything in your life. Okay? And I wish I would have thought to bring to you some proverbs about the lazy person, because the Bible doesn't speak well of the lazy person. On the other hand, it says, better is he who exercises self-control than he who takes a city. So self-discipline is vital if you're ever going to go anywhere in life or in business, as well as achieving your goals. So let me give you Larry Bossidy's and Ram Charan's definition of execution, and you'll know why. When I first opened the book some years ago, I shut it right away. So here's their definition. Execution is a systematic process of rigorously discussing hows and whats, questioning, tenaciously following through. Make sure you're writing all this down. Following through and ensuring accountability. It includes making assumptions about the business environment, assessing the organization's capabilities, linking strategy to operations and the people who are going to implement the strategy, synchronizing those people and their various disciplines, and linking rewards to outcomes. It also includes mechanisms for changing assumptions as the environment changes and upgrading the company's capabilities to meet the challenges of an ambitious strategy. In its most fundamental sense, execution is a systematic way of exposing reality and acting on it. So now you know why I didn't read any further when I picked up this book. I was like, well, okay, I'm far more simple than that. And you can be thankful that I'm not going to try to present to you everything that I've learned thus far from this book. So let me give you Merriam-Webster's definition of execution. The act or process of executing. So we better define executing, right? So as the dictionary would put it, executing is to carry out fully, to completely put into effect, to do what is provided or required by. So in summary, to execute is to engage in the process of executing or fulfilling or acting upon your plan. It's doing what's needed in order to put the plan into place and to see it through to completion. To execute is to engage in the process of executing or fulfilling your plan, doing what is needed in order to put the plan into place and to see it through to completion. So there you go, case closed. But let me give you a few qualifiers, okay? When we talk about getting things done or meeting your goals, executing your plan, the first qualifier is this: man proposes, God disposes. We talked about this last month. Proverbs 16, verse 1 in the Living Bible says, we can make our plans, but the final outcome is in God's hands. Meaning we can have the best laid plans, we can have all the resources needed to fulfill those plans, and we can have every intention of doing so, but the Lord may have something else in mind, okay? I've said it before, our Father is more concerned about conforming you and I to the image of His Son, Jesus, than He is about us fulfilling our goals or achieving success in an endeavor. He's more concerned about that. So if you, actually, I'll come to that in just a moment, but if you find that things aren't going your way, maybe that's what's at work. In view of that, here's another qualifier: your plans need to be submitted to the Lord. The Bible says, commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. The third qualifier is plan to hit the wall. While I've hit many walls during the course of my career, I just learned how this applies to the idea of execution. Just the other night, I was with a friend, and I was sharing with him that I was preparing to speak today. And he says, I read this article in the newspaper that he got some time ago. And he said, you need to plan to hit the wall. What? He says, yeah, you need to plan to hit the wall. In other words, when you write your plan and you undertake to implement it, plan to hit the wall. Plan for challenges. Plan to fail. Plan for things not to go your way. For example, and a very simple example is one of my goals for 2023. I mentioned this last month, was to add 5 additional people to my company, okay? So at the time I was writing my plan, I lost 1. And since last month, I've lost 2 more. So I've hit the wall as it relates to adding personnel. So not only now did I need 5 then, I need 8 now in order to achieve our sales goal for 2023. So, the Israelites, for example, fresh out of Egypt, they had this wonderful promise ahead of them of the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So they hit the wall when they came to the Red Sea, right? They hit a lot of walls, actually. The fourth qualifier is that if there are more people in your business than you, then they may not agree with where you want to take the company. I found that even in my small company is that, when I want to make a change or I want to add some software or I want to go into a different market or I want it for a different client or if I want to change a policy, sometimes I hit the wall. And the wall is the people that work for me. The very people that need to be on board with you are the brick wall that you hit. So that can also affect the implementation of your plan. The fifth and final qualifier is what I've already mentioned, and that is discipline. To execute your plan, to see your goals to fruition requires discipline. And that means an intentional, constant application of your time, your energy, and resources if you want to see it come to pass. The book, Execution, refers to it as self-mastery. And it requires emotional fortitude, integrity, self-awareness. In other words, knowing yourself, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And of course, and the best of all, humility, because God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. So let me give you some steps to execution. So the first thing you want to consider is you've drafted your plan. It's probably a one-year plan. Is that the best approach to take? To look at your plan as a whole, or do you look at it in increments? There is a whole school of thought that says that since there's no way in God's green earth, that you can know what's going to happen 12 months from now, 9 months from now, 6 months from now. So it's better to plan on executing your goals, getting things done in 90-day increments. There's a whole school of thought of that, and I had approached a friend of mine because I heard a guy speak, and they actually have a book and a whole following about this whole process of planning in quarterly installments. And he never got back with me, so I couldn't refer that to you. But the idea is that in 90 days, if you look what's today, February, March, April. So in the next 2-3 months, you can pretty much have a good idea of what will likely happen, okay? In my business, there's a seasonal aspect to it. So I know that in April and May, I need those additional people. I may not need them right now, okay? But I will need them within this 3-month period. I have a 1-year goal of bringing in a new accounting person, and that probably isn't going to happen this quarter, but I need to begin working on it this quarter. So looking at your goals from a quarterly standpoint and putting those into quarterly boxes, if you will, it's the things that you need to do quarter by quarter in 90-day increments is very, very helpful. Looking at a 1-year plan, if you've done your homework and you have some goals, some things that you want to accomplish, looking at it as a whole can be very overwhelming. And I think in the past when I've done business planning, I told you last month that, I've literally written entire books, entire 3-ring binders with sales processes and marketing plans and marketing analysis and all those kinds of things. And frankly, just overwhelming. There's no way I could have done all that, even with people to assign things to. But I could have done certain things in increments. And that's the point. So do you view your plan, execute your plan on the basis of a 1-year perspective or quarterly? There's a strong argument to be made for approaching it on a quarterly basis. I've told you before that my friend Ray Tadgerson, a member of the King's Group here, he's spoken many times. He is a paid advisor of mine as well as a friend. He worked with me on establishing my goals for the year, and it was he that said, Terry, you really need to sort through all this long list of things you want to accomplish this year and just pick 2 or 3 of the most important and focus on those this first quarter. What do you really need to do this first quarter? Focus on those 2 or 3 things. Great advice. And that's what I'm talking about. Look at your plan in increments. The next step in executing your plan is to consider the context. Context is so important. And by context, I mean, what is the current state of your business? What are the existing economic conditions? What are the experts, so to speak, predicting will be coming down the pike economically? What is your personal situation? What was it, 3 years ago? I'm married, I have a family, I have a business, but I had moved my parents back from Arizona for health reasons, and I became a caretaker. Things in business didn't happen the way I thought they would happen because I'm occupied taking care of my parents. So again, your personal situation will weigh heavily or provide a context, for you to execute your plan for the year. Here's an example. If you have a goal to make a major expenditure, like maybe you want to buy a new truck if you're in that sort of a business, or a piece of equipment, or another home, for example, Simba. But you're short on cash at the moment. It may be best to put that off for another quarter or maybe another year. Or if you're in the housing market, as I know Matt is, and interest rates are skyrocketing, maybe acting on the next acquisition right now is not a good idea. So again, context is so important. In my case, this year, I have a lease that comes up in August, and it's usually a 3-year renewal. I'm 72 years old. Context, personal context. Do I want to renew the lease for 3 years? No, I don't. I don't want to renew it. Maybe I'll renew it for a year. But again, the idea is to look at your goals in a context of your personal situation, economic situation, and so forth. Next one is really huge, and it's prioritization. I think we could actually do a whole section on prioritization or setting priority. How do you prioritize? Think about that in your own personal life, for example. How do you spend your time? What are your priorities in life? What does your day look like? If I were to look at your day or yours, mine, we should be able to tell each other, what our priorities are, okay? Well, the same is true for business, and executing your plan is setting the priorities. How many have heard of Stephen Covey? No, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. So he has this thing called the 4 quadrants of time management. And I'm not talking about time management per se, but planning and executing the plan. I thought these would really fit here when we're talking about prioritization. And he has basically 4 quadrants for getting things done. Okay. First one is urgent and important. The second one is not urgent, yet important. The third is urgent, but not important. And the fourth is not urgent and not important. How many of us spend our days in 3 and 4 and not in 1 and 2? Surfing the internet and playing around on social media probably falls under category number 4. Not urgent and not important. So let's talk about urgent and important. These are the things that you have to do right away, that if you don't do them, you may have undesirable consequences to pay. An example from both a personal and business perspective would be the payment of taxes. How many of you pay taxes? Hopefully everybody does. How many of you pay them on time? How many of you have ever missed being on time? Okay, I learned early on to have a healthy fear of the IRS because I had a business partner who spent literally, I'm not exaggerating, spent all of our money. So I had 0 money to pay the suppliers, and I had 0 money to pay the taxes. I think we had 3 children, maybe might have had the 4th by that time. And the IRS came running and levied our checkbook, personal checkbook. Of course, there wasn't hardly anything there, so it wasn't a big deal. But paying your taxes that are due on the 15th becomes urgent and important on the 14th, right? Hopefully you don't put it off that long. Another example, from our office is a large project out for bids. and we've got a good shot at it, and we need the work. It has a due date, and if we want the chance at getting the job, we've got to do everything necessary to make sure that we meet the deadline. That would be an example of urgent and important. The next category is not urgent, but important. Using that same illustration, if the project is out for bid and we have a good shot at it, but the owner says, get it to me as soon as you can, it no longer becomes urgent, but it does become important. And when the urgency is removed from the equation, some things get set aside. The important things get set aside, and I've found it to be true in my own life too often than not, or more often than not, that if something is really important, but there's no urgency to it, that sometimes I might have to be reminded by the client more than once, hey, where's that bid? So not urgent yet important. Planning is like that, because planning really is not urgent, but it's important, right? I hope we've learned by now that planning, whether for your personal life, your family, your company, your future, your finances, planning is important. Having a will and trust, for example, unless you're single and you don't have any assets, you don't have anybody that you're responsible for, it's really easy to put off writing that will or having that trust develop because you're not dead yet. The problem of it is that when you're dead, it's too late. It's really important that you do it, and you actually have to generate a sense of urgency about it. And of course, when you get a little older, there does arise that sense of urgency. So the next one is urgent but not important. I think this is where most of us who are well-intentioned tend to slip up the most, because there's things that pop up all the time that clamor for our attention and demand our time, but in the overall scheme of things, they really don't have that much effect on our lives or our businesses. Anyone got an example for that? Urgent but not important. Who can give me an example? I know my life is fraught with things like that, but I honestly couldn't think of one. But I'm sure there are. And then finally is not urgent but important. We're talking about prioritization as it relates to executing your plan. Not urgent and not important are the things that we really have no business spending our time with. What is the point of spending your precious lifetime on things of no consequence, of no importance? I mentioned social media. Sometimes I wonder why I do that. Well, I know why I do that. I look for people who are getting married, having a baby, who died, or I'm looking for pictures of kids. So that's why we go on social media, and that's virtually the only reason we go on social media. But you can spend a lot of time on social media and waste a lot of time on social media because it's not urgent and it's not important. Next step is timing. The Bible teaches that there's a time for everything. And when prioritizing, this falls under executing your plan and under priorities, you have to take the timing into consideration. When you do something as is important as what you do. As in life, so in business, there's seasons, and it's important for you to recognize that. I remember a time vividly, I can picture it to this day, when something that God spoke to me about my company ran counter to what I was planning to do. I was intent on growing the company, but God, on the other hand, had something else in mind. So we were visiting our kids in California, and while I was there and reading scripture one morning, the Holy Spirit quickened to me a verse from 2 Kings. And it said this, "In those days, the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel." Bam. Here I am. I have goals to expand. And the Lord's saying, nope, we're going to back off. We're going to reduce the size of the company. And over time, that happened. I went from a company of 60 employees down to, at times, as low as 10 or 12 employees. Now we have 15, depending on the season, maybe 16, 17. While it's said if you're not growing, you're dying, this is not always the case because God has his purposes, and our purposes don't always line up with his. And there is such a thing as pruning. How many have ever been pruned? Personally, corporately? And I can cite several examples from my business career of being majorly pruned. So when prioritizing and executing your plan, you really have to take timing into consideration. Is now the right time for that acquisition? Is now the right time to hire that person? Is now the right time to close down that branch or purchase another property? Timing is really, really important. Next, in the process of executing your plan is initiative. James writes, "Be a doer of the word and not a hearer only." So we might say, as it relates to planning and getting things done, be a planner and an executor of your plan. In other words, take the necessary steps to accomplish your goals. That would be initiative. By definition, initiative is an introductory step or an initiation of action. My friend and mentor, the late Jim Russell, used to say, the journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with one step. That's initiative. Your goals and what you want to accomplish this year or in any given period of time might be overwhelming. Maybe you've got one of those big, hairy, audacious goals that Jim Collins talks about in his book. They may be so big, so daunting, so as to scare you away. But initiative says take the first step or take that leap of faith. My friend and elder, Dwayne Felposh, has told me more than once you can't steer a parked car. You've got to be moving ever so. You might just have to be moving 1 mile an hour, and you can steer it if it's going 1 mile an hour, but you can't if it's in park. The law of momentum, I just posted a blog to our website here this last month, titling it The Big Mo. There is such a thing, it's called the law of momentum. And that law says just basically get going. Get moving, take action, any action, just get going. Personally, I have a bit of a problem with initiative, the idea of initiative, not necessarily taking it. Virtually every teaching that you have ever heard about leadership, I'm sure in the leadership school, includes taking the initiative, right? Yet on the other hand, Jesus said on more than one occasion, I do nothing on my own initiative. So how do you square those up? I don't know. Well, I do know. If you go back to planning, you make your plans in concert with the Lord, in the light of the Lord's countenance and at his direction. You just don't go at it haphazardly or with little concern or care about what God's purpose might be for your life. And so when you're setting your goals ought to be inspired by the Holy Spirit, led by the Holy Spirit, something that God wants you to do. And therefore, you can, in good conscience, seek to execute those plans because they're from the Lord to begin with. Because Jesus says, I don't do anything unless I see or hear my Father say or do it, right? So when you're writing your plan, hopefully you've been hearing from the Lord, and you can step out in those areas in faith because it was God to begin with that gave you the ideas. Problem solved. Delegate. This is really huge. So Moses was a man with huge responsibility. He was under orders to lead a host of millions of men, women, and children. I think the nut count was 1.5 million, but if you take the women and the children into consideration, because back then they would just count the men, millions upon millions and millions of people he was given charge for, to lead them to the land that God had promised him. Not only that, Moses was the recipient of God's laws, right? And it was his responsibility to impart those laws to the children of Israel. And on top of that, he was to be the judge. And so his father-in-law Jethro comes along and he observes Moses trying to do it all. And he has some good advice for Moses. I'm going to read to you a number of verses from the book of Exodus, chapters 13 through 26. The next day Moses sat to judge the people. Just picture it. Millions of people, they got all these problems. They don't like Moses. They got problems with some of the other leaders. So there's this huge line with people moaning and groaning and complaining about this and that. So anyway, he sits to judge the people. And the people stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he says, "What is it that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves, so it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all the people will also go to their place in peace." Delegation. Any good organization that gets anything done, goes anywhere, has this in place, the delegate. You look at our church, we have a lead pastor, Pastor Kevin. He's delegated the executive responsibilities to Pastor Joe Mead, who in turn, he has an executive team to whom he has delegated certain areas and certain departments. This executive team then delegates to certain other department heads or people of less responsibility, and they in turn have people under them that if they're doing their job, they're delegating responsibilities to, so on and so forth. In large organizations and in small organizations alike, if you want to get anywhere, do anything, get anything done, there needs to be the process of delegation. And I'm sure I speak for many of you who have run small businesses, are running a small business. You realize that even in a small business, you cannot do it all. You cannot do everything. You may think you can, but you can't. And here's another factor that plays into it. The business is your baby. You're the one that built the business. You're the one that knows how to do it, and nobody can do it better than you. Not really. Not really. There's probably a lot of people that could do it better than you. Besides that, you can't do it all, and if you try to do it all, you can't do what you do effectively, let alone in a efficient and quality manner. So you've got to look at other people doing some of the things that you yourself have to do. Yes, sir? Indeed. You have to give the person that you're delegating to the power to make the decisions. Delegation can be done within your firm, meaning from people within your firm, or without, meaning you can pass off an objective or a goal or an area of responsibility to another competent person within your company, or you can hire somebody in to do that, or you can outsource that responsibility. The same principle is the same. In order to get a thing done, you can outsource that thing to another person or organization. Yes, sir? I'm sorry, I can't. Where's that other microphone at?
I said you can delegate, which is very important. How important is it to then supervise what we have delegated?
Yeah, it's super, super important because we're going to talk about accountability in a few minutes. I mean, whatever you do and whatever you're delegating or outsourcing, within your company or out of your company, there has to be accountability. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. There are certain things that virtually every small company will want to outsource. Early on, like in the very first months of starting my company in 1985, I was advised to find one of the best CPA firms in the city and procure them, hire them. And I did. Plant Moran is still one of the best, maybe the best in the area. And I hired Plant Moran at the time. I'm this small little company with big dreams, and I hired the best. We also hired an attorney firm. And we also looked at one of the good banks at the time. Most of us in our companies don't have in-house CPAs or attorneys, right? So we need to outsource those areas. One of my 2023 goals, for example, is because so much business is done via social media, and as I've told you, I'm not really good at social media. Actually, don't even really like it all that much. But I do know that a lot happens, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. So one of my goals this year was to re-up some semblance of engagement in social media. And I've actually been talking with Vicki, who just started a marketing company, about doing that. So that would be an example of outsourcing that particular goal or area that I need help with. Another goal I have this year, since I was forced because of manpower needs to put our warehouse manager into the field, now I have a warehouse that's unmanaged. I have all this equipment and vehicles that nobody's keeping track of. And so one of my goals is to raise up somebody or bring in someone who would be able to manage our physical plant, if you will. So you get the picture. Like Moses, you can't do everything. And when it comes to executing your plan, oftentimes, if not always, you need to delegate some responsibility. That leads me to the next step in implementing your plan, and that's people. Yucks. People. Key to any enterprise is people. I used to think, well, if it weren't for people, I'd get a lot done. But that's the opposite of what's actually true. Without people, you really can't accomplish much at all. A key principle that I picked up from Jen Collins' book, Good to Great, was that you need to have, not only need to have people, but you got to have the right people on the bus, which is your company, and they need to be in the right seats on the bus. right? That same principle I read in the book Execution here is that you got to have the right people in the right place doing the right things at the right time. But the foundation there is the person or the people. I mentioned that timing is so important. You know, it's been said that timing is everything. Well, Graham Cook said it like this: when the opportunity of a lifetime comes, you must make sure you respond within the lifetime of the opportunity. The opportunity won't last forever. You got to take advantage of it. And you need to be able to have people to take advantage of it. You will never accomplish what God has called you to do in life or in your organization without the aid of other people. Two people are always better than one. Yeah. Which one? Oh, really? Maybe he was quoting him. I don't know.
It was often quoted by Steve Hill during the Pensacola revival. He said that a lot. So, and it's true spiritually,
It is.
in the spirit realm as well as in the physical.
Yeah. To get things done, I mean, I have a painting company, and just imagine, you know, I want to start a painting company, but I don't have any painters. So that would be problematic, eh? So yeah, I need people in order to function in the area that God has called me to function in. There's sales that have to be done. You know, it's customers that need to be contacted. I need people to do that. I can't do all that myself. I can't do all that needs to be done myself. We need people. You've heard it said that people are our greatest asset. It's a true statement. But there are people who will say things, but the reality is that they treat people like pawns for just getting things done, and that's not what I'm talking about, okay? People are our most valuable asset. They're more important than the prophets. They're more important than anything. Christ sacrificed his life for people. To use people to get you where you want to go is perhaps one of the most selfish things that you can do. Obviously, you have a business that God has given you. You have objectives. You know, I have sales goals, I have profit goals, I have personnel goals. But for me to view the people in my company as mere pawns to achieve my personal interests, you know, make me money, is the wrong view. Yeah.
There's a famous quote by Zig Ziglar that I love. It's kind of along that line. And it says, you can get everything you want in life if you have enough other people get what they want.
Yeah, that's so good.
It's such a true statement
Yeah.
that I've been living my life with since then. Because if you care about people, you understand what they want, and you help them get what they want, then your reputation grows, and you get everything you want by just simply helping other people get where they want to go.
Yep. It's so, so true. Well put, thank you. Our ultimate objective, obviously, is to glorify the Lord and further his kingdom. But that's not going to happen if you view people in the wrong way. While you need people in order to get things done, and hopefully your plans, your goals of getting things done are from the Lord, remember that you need them as much as they need you. I can't further God's kingdom the way that I'm seeing God have me do that without the people that I employ. But they need me too, because they have families to support. And I'm acutely aware of that. Jesus said, if you want to be great, learn to be a servant of all. So picture yourself in your firms, in your areas of responsibility as you're there to serve not only your customers in order to make money and a profit, but you're there to serve your employees too. I take that attitude on myself. I hope my employees feel that way about me, because that's my attitude towards them. Another consideration when it comes to getting things done is the resources. And I kind of talked about this a little bit, but you need resources to accomplish your goals. And that should be part and parcel of your annual plan and should be considered when you set your goals. I told you last month, like I have a goal this year. I'm a small company. We've been hovering right around $1.5 million a year, 1.6, 1.3, 1.7, you know. And I've decided that I've set my goal to be $2 million this year. And for that, I've determined how much per employee, how much an employee generates in a year on average. So that's where I got my goal of hiring 5 additional painters. That would give me an additional $500,000 in revenue. I would meet my $2 million goal. So the point of it is, in order to reach my goal, I need X amount of people, and in order to secure those people, I need to spend X amount of dollars finding those people, processing those people, training those people, getting them out into the field. Not only that, but I've got to supply them and I've got to pay them. Okay, so those are resources that have to be present or potentially present in order to achieve my sales goals of $2 million. You get the picture? You've got to have the resources in order to fulfill a particular goal or area of your plan for that year. Really important. In that context, you've got to consider the cost versus the benefit. So for me to bring in 5 new people and all the costs that are associated with that, is that going to provide me the benefit that I think I'm going to get? It's called a cost versus benefit analysis. You know, is what I'm going to spend to achieve a goal going to provide me with the benefit that I think it's going to provide me with? It's really important when you're considering getting things done, executing your plan, and in the context of the resources that you're going to have to expend to meet a goal, the cost versus the benefit. Now we talk about accountability. And man, it's an 8-hour audio book, so I'm halfway through. And I was up north this last weekend, so on my way up and on the way back, I'm shouldn't be doing this, but I'm writing in my notebook as I'm driving 75 miles an hour northward on 75, all these little things that I'm learning from the book. And a couple of times I spoke them into my notes on my phone, but one of the things that's super huge, at least so far in the book that I've got, is holding people accountable for their performance. Okay? Accountability that you talked about. Supervising people. Really hit me hard. I'm not a socialist by any shake of the stick. You know, I'm a capitalist all the way. But as I was listening to these guys, to the audiobook, I was thinking, you know, I really approach my people in so many ways like socialism, because you know, I want to bless them, and so I'm doing the same thing for everybody, whether they warrant it or not. And some of the men that I'm working for, they're great guys and stuff, but they just don't warrant the same bonuses, for example, as the guys that are the super achievers. Personally, I'm really a huge fan. I believe in accountability. I pay my advisor, Ray Tadgerson, I pay him to be accountable to him. My dear friend and elder, Dwayne Felposh, I view him as a person to whom I am accountable. And likewise, as a ministry of this church and a member of this church, I'm under the pastoral care of Kevin Berry. I am accountable to him. And I'm really accountable to my employees, because if I screw up, if I do something crazy like pursue this goal and it costs too much and it doesn't play out, then they're the ones that are going to suffer for it. I'll suffer, yeah, but they'll suffer too. They might not have work. They might have to lay them off. I might have to cut benefits, whatever the case may be. But not only should you be accountable, but your people need to be accountable too. So when we're talking about people being your greatest asset, that's true, but they need to perform. Like you were saying, Simba, you know, you can't hire people that are just out there for the paycheck. You need to have people that really exhibit care. And in my business, the trades, we have to have an attitude of service, an attitude of quality, of professionalism, and they need to be held accountable. And I'll be the first one to admit that I hate confrontation. I like being accountable, but I don't like holding other people accountable. I don't like to create conflict or uncomfortable circumstances, but that is the business leaders, the business owners' responsibility. And if you have other people and you want to get things done, then people need to be held accountable. I've told you many times about how my company got started. Fresh out of the chute, January 1985, I've got a strategic plan, the first one I ever had in my life. I'm 35 years old, and the King's Club, as it was called then, assigned 3 people to my company to hold me accountable and to make sure that I did what I said I was going to do for that first year in business. And they did. Subsequently, over the years, and I finally left off of a group, I called them an advisory board. I paid upwards of, there was at times 7 or 8 people, I paid them quarterly to come in. It was an unofficial board, an advisory board. I paid them, and they would come in quarterly, and I would give them my financial statements. I would report to them, how my business had been performing, and I would submit to them decisions that I was looking to make or problems that I was having as a company. Accountability, last year we talked about stewardship, right? And there's one thing about being a steward of God's resources, that you're going to be accountable to God. You are going to be accountable to God. So accountability is really huge. A couple of years ago, it's actually been more than a few years ago, I had an attitude problem. By nature, I view things as the glass is half full or half empty. How's that go? Yeah, half empty. It's the negative view as opposed to half full, which is the positive view. Well, I'm always, seeing the negative in things. And one of my advisory board members, the dean of business of Spring Arbor College, he was on my advisory board, addressed that. And so I don't know if we'd met for a year or two after that. I met with him once a month and to give an account as to how I was doing with my attitude. And he had, as the dean of business, I don't know if he ever got the book published, but he had written a systematic performance approach to performance reviews, and had forms where you would actually agree on things that you would do, and then you'd come back to the next meeting and you'd give a report on whether you did it or not, how it went, and basically it was called the same page. And so I met with him every month for God knows how long, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and he called me, how's your attitude, Anyway, accountability is huge. Just one or two more points here and I'll be done, and that's culture. Okay, I published a small book last year called Your Business Matters to God, and I talk about creating godly culture. In the book, I say that there's no such thing as a Christian company, because companies don't get saved in the spiritual sense. People get saved, right? So you can have a company that's run by Christians that has a godly culture, okay? And so it's important that you have a culture that is geared towards getting things done, execution. And they talk about that a lot in this book, creating a performance culture. For me, I like the idea of a godly culture. Most of the people who work for me are not Christians. Hopefully some of it's been rubbing off on them. I think it has. In the book Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about a culture of discipline. Really like that idea. And again, in this particular book, Execution, they talk about a performance culture. Culture is, by definition, the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. And it's your responsibility, if you have your own company, your own business, or you want to have one, then it's your responsibility to create the culture in that company, okay? And if you're not creating a culture of achieving objectives, meeting goals, then chances are you will never see your plan completed. You know, in my business, as in many others, we quote painting projects, and we develop a budget. We use software for that. Been doing it for 40 years, so we pretty much know how long things should take. So we have a budget for that particular job, and that is in the form of man hours and gallons. And so the hourly budget goes to the worker on a work order form outlining what he or she is supposed to do. And if they're successful, they'll meet those hours or beat those hours. And if they're not, then we'll lose money on the project. And the point being is that in order for TL Hart Incorporated to realize it's not only its sales goals, but its profit goals, and with the profit goals, our giving goals and our profit sharing goals, then there needs to be this culture cultivated of performance. You need to perform. If you want to receive the benefit of performance, then you need to perform. And that needs to be a cultural thing. You have to create that and demonstrate that. So I'm going to give a couple of quotes with regards to this, and this really hit me hard. Really hit me hard. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I believe I got the quotes right. So these are from the book, and so they're quotes. I don't remember which guy was saying this, but it says, leaders get the behavior that they exhibit and tolerate. Leaders get the behavior that they exhibit and they tolerate. The culture of the company is the culture of its leaders. No leader who is disengaged from the daily operation of the company can expect to sustain or change the culture of a company. Like, whoa, that really hit. I told you I'm 72. I don't go in at 7 o'clock anymore and work until 6 or 7 days a week. I don't do that anymore. I go in at 10 or 11. I leave at 4:30 or 5, and I'm thinking, if the culture of the company is the culture of its leaders, does that mean I'm going to see performance go down because I'm not in the office all the time like I used to be? I don't know. It's something that really grabbed my attention. Here's another one. The behavior of the business leader is ultimately the behavior of the organization. The behavior of the business leader is ultimately the behavior of the organization. It is the foundation of its culture. So how I am as a person, as a believer, how I behave, how I treat customers, how I treat employees and vendors, how I respond to circumstances, good or bad, the kinds of policies that I write, the changes that I make, is ultimately going to determine how the people under me behave and live as well. It's a huge challenge. Planning is one of those things that is important, but it's not urgent. But it's really important because if you chart a course for yourself, even if you don't execute fully, or if you fail to execute or execute improperly, chances are very good that you're going to at least begin going in the direction that you've charted out in writing. So my final comment is this: obey God. Right? Who is it that says the end of the matter, when all has been said and done, the end of the matter is fear God and keep his commandments, right? That means that it might mean that you abandon your plans and allow God to take you on the ride of your life. It was that way for me the first 10 years of this millennium, when I went from very big to almost bankrupt. I was heading in one direction, but God was taking me in another. And the point is, you just need to do what God says. And if you don't know what that is, get alone with him, find out what he wants you to do, and then undertake to do that. Jesus said, not my will, but your will be done. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you for our time together. I thank you for every person here, every family represented by the people here, every business, every dream, every hope, every enterprise, every endeavor, every goal, every plan that's represented here in this room, as well as of those who are not here today. God, I just put all those before you. I pray, God, that you surround each person with favor. And as Gideon has taught me to pray, God, may you give each person wisdom, health, understanding, and favor in everything that they put their hand to. Like Joseph, you are with us. And like Joseph, God, bless the work of our hands. Give us success in the name of Jesus.